Praise to Manjushri. Protect Manjushri, our houses and houses. To understand which path forward. It is called Lama rises in the strip.
Whose path of soul wisdom, whose and suffering were expressed practically, the renewing darkness of all ignorance. I teach you on whose priestly body is adorned with 112 marks of Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning, traditionally all loving one with the brilliance of your wisdom, and illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdoms, and may gain insight into Buddha's words and the text that explain them.
Sangye Chedam Soji Chananga Chanjo Padu Dani Gyatsuchi Dani Chushengi Betsona Yola Veche Sangye Churva Sho Sangye Chedam Soji Chananga Chanjo Padu Dani Gyatsuchi Dani Chushengi Betsona Yola Veche Sangye Churva Sho Sangye Chedam Soji Chananga Chanjo Padu Dani Gyatsuchi Dani Chushengi Betsona Yola Veche Sangye Churva Sho Kanki Tuzini Zuni Tawa Tamji Bambi Chere Kanki Chun Tunze Kodum Kela Changze Lo Good morning everyone. Samdi Sumba Gyo Kongi Kondo Keshushi Gobatana Chawanis Jimbi Paru Chilaso Kongi Kondo Keshuchi Chungi Chen Chimu Tochi Singi Kensamos
So we've been looking at the way to train in the ethics of gathering virtuous dhammas, and in covering the second point in this section, one should be knowledgeable about accomplishing virtue. Yesterday we started with being knowledgeable about performing actions of the 3 doors. We came to point 3, connecting yourself solely with virtuous karma, which consists of 3 points. We covered verse 81 and 82, and today we're going to pick up from verse 83. It comes under the heading of entering into higher and higher virtues and having examined whether there is a purpose acting upon it. Let's look at verse 83. The perfections of giving and so forth, increase them one after the other. Do not abandon the big for the small. Many think towards the purpose of others. Shall we do some tea and coffee offering?
Lama Sangye Lama Chu, Geshe Lama Gere, Geshe Lama Lama Chu.
일단 준비 파를 칠렀어. 공리공리 계속제스. 소녀디 맨날 80주기 냠는다고디 고마고마네 아니 고마고마 맨날 키드 파바리 슬라운디 서브 맨날 칼칼 도치기 어딘지 도고레스
So it says the perfection of giving and so forth increase them one after another, in a sense that the latter perfections are higher than the earlier perfections. They become more and more subtle. They become more difficult to practice. The latter one surpass the earlier ones.
제디자 맨날 다 짐바 냠니치니 아니 수점내 펜바다 아니 수점 냠니치니 소바가 펜바 아니 소비 냠는게 종주 냠는게 삼대이 냠는게 셔럽 어두스 아니 케버드 파워치야 아니 컴펠 땅고 요르와스라.
So in that sense, the perfection of generosity benefits ethics. Ethics and generosity benefit patience. Patience benefits joyous effort. Joyous efforts towards absorption, and absorption benefits wisdom. In that sense, the latter ones are well distinguished, or they surpass the earlier ones.
다 총체는 체무동 조체신기 된상모스 지단기 배나 자와 춘준지기 체도 고바 춘준지기 체도 아니 고바 첨부 주야디 löta는 지금 말이스 배나 다 지금 말에 다 총이 바이네야 아니 캡선 춘준지기 체도 맞아 첨부 땅샤와이나 경라와 나신기 아니 냠는 돌에 다라 배나 아니 장든 삼진이 현든 lö타와이나 아니 장신이기 된 라그야지 차로에서 배나 딘지레스 배나 아니 장든의 현든을 되바이나 이지민지기 아니 장든 lötan 현든을 주바이나 아니 고바치무 주고에서 디나신진 로고레스.
It says in the last two lines, do not abandon the big for the small. Many think towards the purpose of others. So do not abandon the big for the small, in a sense that rather do not relinquish the greater purpose and focus on something that is small or insignificant. It's just like you could say that when you're conducting a business, just to give you an illustration, when you're conducting a business and you're expecting to have a profitable business, you need to invest to create the foundation for your business. Without that, you're going to incur losses. So here, if you want to accomplish something that is great, you need also to make sure that you create the foundation for that. So for example, if you completely neglect or ignore the welfare of others, and you focus solely on your own benefit, let alone not being able to accomplish the benefit of others, you'll also not be able to accomplish your own benefit. In that sense, you'll be losing on both ends. Whereas if you relinquish your own purpose and you focus on the purpose of others, you'll accomplish a great purpose.
다 란든의 현진지 쪼디 비 란진진다 신진진기 아니 상로토야 자고고라스라 마도치당 안주게 pe 신제번 지한티야 타투 아니 란든 랑기 약슈질이야 리위어로스라 인자 란진진 치데디 슈총당 아니 신진진 치데디 슈치르당바이나 데니 Reta Dinichigo or Sra.
Now, when we speak about relinquishing the purpose of self or one's own welfare and pursuing the welfare of others, what we mean to say is that we relinquish a self-cherishing attitude and we develop an attitude of cherishing others. So the best way to accomplish your own welfare, your own purpose, would be through cherishing others. And therefore, we want to reduce our self-cherishing attitude and to increase, to enhance the attitude that cherishes other sentient beings.
Dirda Dangan Junjugi, Junjuk Devi Gooden, so the Lojong Yongyak Chet. Lojong Diongo, Restan Namgyung Zuchi. The Chu Karjane, Tabachi Chu Karjane, so Lojong Sigdos, Lojong, and Lojong Yadi. Nanzu Lolaya Kariore, Tomamewan Comdiadi, Ranchin Zindang, and Shen Yav to be sounded the Comdeoros, that the Jonchin, Ranchin Zingi, Lord Desaki, Sajadelaya, Shenchin Zink, Samlodi, and it should trick to Vaina, and it Tachanju Sim said, Kia Gita Reva Yorosra.
So what we're studying here is mind training. We engage with the Dhamma, particularly the Mahayana Dhamma, and the purpose of that is to train our mind. When we engage with the Dhamma, we engage with a mind training system, and even more so here in the Mahayana Dhamma. In recognizing that since down without beginning and up until now, our mind has been governed by a self-cherishing attitude and a sense of disregarding others. So now we exchange this position. Rather than the seat that has a mind, I'll say it again. Rather than living self-cherishing in the seat that it has occupied in our mind, we put something else in that seat. What we put in that seat is an attitude of cherishing others.
Terida, these are the Chunju Yamnichi, Godin the Ranjinzingi Lodelia, Gyantong to Etchik. Ranjinzing Lolaya, Gyandam, Shinjinzing Lolaya, Yondin Tombaina, Teni Lojong di Yonyagita, Shitatembuch, Suyoras, that the Gyantongor said, Gyantongor sells a mind, one a tanigi, Gyan Yadame. Tayadi, Namjugudos, Sherab Tony, and one Tani Ranjin Lodi, Genji Rendumudi, the Tagoras Ra.
So we see the faults of an attitude of self-cherishing. And we also see the qualities of cherishing others. And that will provide us a stable basis for mental development. And when we say that we need to see the faults of our attitude of cherishing ourselves, it's not merely seeing faults. It's rather that we use wisdom, intelligence that analyzes the faults of a self-cherishing attitude and verifies that such an attitude is faulty. This is the meaning of seeing faults in a self-cherishing attitude.
Terida, the Ranjinzing Lolaya, Gyun Tawandigi, Gyun Kari Yobat, Chidanta Gogros, and it's Savigi, Louis Gyundi, and in Zindan Yomayu Tolia. Lo Lobata, Lo Lokshidan, Lo Tundusagi, Namichiondi, so Zindangu Yu Tolia, Chichioris. In a come to the Jinzang Yuza Mayimba, Ranjinzing Lodi Gyundi. Ranglaya Dunga Tamjin Jembigi and Shimon Zawa Nating in the Ranjinzi Race Somba Nanshingi Sangi, T in the Mintani, one Ranjinzingi and Dunga Tamjin Jengi over D and Munzin Chitubaina, the Ranjinzing Lolaya, Gyunton to Osaris.
So then in looking at whether an attitude of cherishing ourselves is faulty, we need to recognize what it is. What is an attitude of self-cherishing? And we do that through also looking at its mode of apprehension. So looking at a mode of apprehension of a self-cherishing attitude, we investigate whether it is a factually concordant consciousness, which means that does it accord with reality, or is it a wrong consciousness? So that could be one way of looking at the faults of a self-cherishing attitude in the investigation of its mode of apprehension and determining whether it is a wrong consciousness or whether it accords with reality. But here, in a more specific way, when we look at the faults of a self-cherishing attitude, what we want to recognize, the point that we want to get to, is the recognition of how it brings forward or it issues all the unsought suffering that we experience. This is the very foundation, the very basis for all the sufferings and difficulties that we experience.
Odirida ra pena jenjinzingi ani sanglodi digi thamjinjimbi shimataw ranjinzindi dunga thamjinjimbi shimataw somba nashingi ta ngunjin chetugo gores ta dindi ngunjin yongya dia ngazu chi pigila ya chitang lojong cheba zamda chi samlo tamba zamgi and di ngunjin chetuya di khabu shuchik yungu yores ta di khaisna di zu gyapten di and ta nambi ngandu shudeva nashingi kyamdu namda chikudas ra ani kyawi kunjo sunla ya yiche namda chik sangila ya ngone thani ge semding yiche ani sangi ge che ma tenging lama giwi shinyi na yiche da teba yabu chik thoni ani chonju taw ani pe and dawa khashi jirila ya ngone thani lo chik di dream chini pigila ya ta nyamne chebaina kyen tong tu go sares ro timado tu chitang lojong sora chila ya si chin ro de baina ani lo tu ni chonju jambaina ya ani samla phendi khabu shu chago sares.
So we say that an attitude of cherishing others is the very foundation of all the happiness and well-being that will come in the future. And cherishing ourselves is the foundation of all the suffering that will come later on. So just to train our mind in thinking of these faults, just to see self-cherishing as the basis of all suffering and cherishing others as the foundation that is true, without really thinking about it properly, is really difficult. It's going to be difficult to think that a mind will genuinely transform just through thinking that those attitudes are faulty, that self-cherishing is faulty and cherishing others is good. What we need to do is to, first of all, begin with developing pure refuge. To purely go for refuge. We go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And in developing pure refuge, we develop a deep sense of trust in the three objects of refuge. We develop pure trust in the Buddha. We then also develop pure trust in the Lama, the spiritual teacher. And we spend some time studying from that spiritual teacher, like, for example, the system of Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva way of life, the system of mind training. We spend some time in studying that and also in thinking about it, putting it into practice. And through that, after some time, changes start to occur, and we can genuinely then recognize the faults in our own attitude of self-cherishing and the benefits of an attitude of cherishing others. Otherwise, if we don't follow it like that, we might be reading Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva way of life 1 year, and then the next year, and the year after that as well. But genuine change will not come if we don't really follow it through in a proper way.
데레다 비기라야 겸르 남다 아니 대바야고 다디 톨이야 아니 소서 줍장세비 페나타 냥닌 칭인질이야 다 소서 줍장기 메타메틱 소서 줍장기 갑데 메나 아니 랑귤라 토비 용데세디 자우니는 트롬스이거치 일단 풍기케 담바투즈 아니 칭미님이 돈 손도아스 라 디자 다 소서 줍장 쪼디 제당한도 따지 아니 렌다사야리 차피야리 초바피야리 소바피 상물로 아니 소소비 양라리스 이네 약슈디 페나타 소즈 냠뇽 사람들 디리톤 시바이나 약슈디 아니 라마기비신인기 샤도슈디 페시 랍치슈티 인사리 삼구도스라 간스나 페나 아니 조지기 남들 두스 지온디게 아니 디나노라야 페나 자원 름tam바디 아니 타마들이야 또바 토슈 차야디 고즈 캄볼이야 라미 샤도 슈비기 엔 니엘란데니 총아지 남들 코라나노가 세기어레스 아니 소즈 메제나노라야 아니 지 gyurumul keda chiyomardaina gerumulchilaya shabshishiwi jesu and pechal testena is coding it roach kovadia semle pengi roach so semle di jasjatam sorgiyus.
So we need to have pure refuge. We need to have good faith. And together with that, we also need to accumulate the collections and to purify obscurations. Accumulations and purifications are totally indispensable for that. Without the accumulations of the collection and purification of obscurations, it would be impossible to develop qualities of realizations. So we do different things in order to accumulate the collections and purify obscurations. We might be offering mandalas during prostrations, reciting mantras such as the 100-syllable mantras and so forth. But these are only branches for the accumulations and purification. And we can do all those different practices, and still Geshe feels that one of the best ways to accumulate the collections and purify obscurations is through attending to one's spiritual teacher. Geshe can say that based upon his own personal experience, but also when you look at the life stories of great masters of the past, such as, for example, the way that Gyawa Druntumba attended his teacher, George Atisha, and towards the end of his life, in the latter part of his life, he was able to attain a greater level of spiritual development on the basis of attending his spiritual teacher. This is how it comes through in the narratives of Druntumba. Also, Geshe feels that on a personal level, even though he didn't get to spend many years doing that with his spiritual teacher, still in attending his spiritual teacher, he was able to develop some understanding in his studies. And the understanding that he developed, Geshe feels that is attributed to attending his spiritual teacher.
가르쳐왔다. 기억담바 빼는 지점이라를 붙다고 임바이나 아니 라미 샵도 들어볼 때니 엔 트리뷰 콤보 터버지 이용자 송겨라스 딘난신게 빼는 조지 반대 아디시 코라 임바이나야 라마세니비 샵도 라마 템벌 때니 총바디 코라랑기 빼 디샤진 난거라스 도 시온디게 디쇼치 간지 and Susulaya na Toby Yundi, Caberchinji, Chonguyana, T. Zawa, and Lamagivishin to Yobadi, same thing, Nishi Tambi Tony, and Shabdo Sugoya. The Shabdo Shadian, Pena, Naya which Chona Samson, Nalaya Mia which Chona Samson, Kono Dindiji Shabdo Shibana, and Zawanin Dini Nodrogores, Colombia Samba Namda, Teba Namda Tony. Ngilush Samson Roach. Ra or Dinding Tony, Cardinchim Sam Tony, Shutawayna, any that Penguris, Ra Lojon Dinding Yamili, Jachajam Penguris.
Tazandi Kadila Lama Shapto Seadi Lama Ten Samla Den Lagirve, Yamena Lama Gishapchichi Den Lagir.
샵치랑 인기 말다 지단 까지 되지 쑥 그렇지 라 조고다 종나 따지 라마당 비기 에 비타도 제투에 종나 가와산슈 dimji kogo rangindi hajang minyo do sira pena jawramachi kuma kya sonda.
So now when we speak of attending a spiritual teacher, the meaning is not to become an attendant, but to rely upon a spiritual teacher. So to attend a spiritual teacher in the sense that you properly rely upon a spiritual teacher. And your way of relying upon a spiritual teacher becomes good, it goes well. In a sense that you practice in a way that accords with the instructions that your teacher gives you. After all, becoming an attendant of someone, if we understand the word attend in a really limited way, to become an attendant of someone, well, only a few people get to do it. So it's not that only if you get to be an attendant, you'll be able to accumulate the collections and purify obscurations. Here we understand it in a more kind of in a wider context. If you practice well in a way that accords with the instructions, that's the way of accumulating the collections and purifying, accumulating the collections and purifying obscurations, which is also something that is clear in the biography of the great masters of the past, like for example, Milarepa attended his own spiritual teacher, Marpa, and it depends upon that, he was able to accomplish a great or a high level of accomplishment. Also, Atisha, attendant or relied upon his spiritual teacher, Lama Senlimpa, and depends upon which he was also able to attain his own level of spiritual attainment. So when we then think of relying upon a spiritual teacher, rather than thinking that I'm going to do that so that I'll get a good reputation, I'll find myself in a better position altogether, I will be able to attain a higher rank and so forth. Your way of relying upon a spiritual teacher should be devoid of that, but should be together with a deep sense of trust and faith in the spiritual teacher, and wanting to practice in a way that accords with their instructions.
다 망부소요스 자원무치기 라미 소디 용진링무치 링무치 다 고노 통부차 아니지 심진 나올래야 슈데베 거들래야 다 가서 도모드진 항올래야 지 kuzu madivi tsuchin shudevi kaudulaya an jawarumuchi da ningu kabtudi jawarumuchi ta chik ani phigi ta phigi chapsi tunghe yonzo yoinza ningu legon da metindi tungde na ani chik gonda chu chadi tini ya lin labran yosati dharam sa thotali ya gonda takpa ya ani nirumuchi kunduli chagi yos ani nirumuchi tus chik kuzu madi chu shuyadi ini nga rangi pe chedu ani ngi tsoza dojang chedu tagarang ani yimba tingi pe ani yasha gyatamba ti and to tugdus and yawarumuchi tindisungdus.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama tells his experience in terms of relying upon a spiritual teacher, and his senior tutor was the previous reincarnation of Gyabje Rinpoche, right? So His Holiness says that during the day he had to attend to his own responsibilities. So he had an office, he had meetings and so forth. So he had to perform quite a lot of tasks and things that belong to his responsibility. But then in the evening, he used to go to Rinpoche's residence at Dharamsala. He was already elderly and unwell. So he used to go in the evening to his teacher, to the Ling Labdang's residence at Dharamsala, and attend to his teacher. And he said that for him, he said that the way that he viewed Rinpoche was that he's manifesting or showing the aspect of being unwell for the sake of the Dalai Lama. And he said that for him, Dalai Lama said that for him, it was a way of accumulating the collections, purifying negativities and obscurations. He saw that, he realized that the way that Ling Rinpoche was manifesting being unwell was in order to help or assist his honors in the accumulations and purifications.
Teri dinzata penatang an samalo man cheagita and Yaurumbuchi tang one tani tang an Zalam Zuk Novisingdi Chagioras dinzata Kongi pena and Kason Chiduk Shutuwaina Nanzu Dishi Lexo Tamji and Mundruya Zavanini Yomaris and Kongi Ka Seman Zinchin Kongi Chisun Tolia Rotuwaina and Pendoyores, Madochi, any Kongi Pilia, any Garnasha Yudi, the Meshambajilia, and Samsud and Tonsu do Samchini, Yaurumuchi Kadi, and Marin Dondoros, Londendo Chevaina, the daily Dibat Savchida, daily any George Zawin Yomaris.
For most of us, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is like a precious gem. So if we get to attend teachings, to get teachings from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to put them into practice, we accumulate great collection of virtues, great collection of causes for happiness and well-being here and hereafter, in this life and future lifetime. So if we consider what His Holiness says to be valid, his speech to be a valid speech, and we take the teachings and put them into practice, we're going to accomplish a great benefit. But if we then relate to what His Holiness says, and in a conversation with others, we're going to disparage those teachings, saying that, oh, this is not true, or His Holiness said is not good, the way that he said that is not good, and so forth. We're just going to create those negative situations rather than finding beneficial situations.
When the sewage shiwana, Chidangi, the Pevich Zonal, Netsuchongudi, Nichie Kalaya, Tetsamgi, Koyor, the Samasons, Inayan, and Dashing Ilia, Dawaching Kolia, Yaurumuchigi, Tangamugune, Wanam Katulaya, and Pebi Pigi, Lama in Singing. And Mikachri, and it came a poor dingy, and to go yet of your singing digi, chick, Talam Guinea on Namayana, Togmar and Dondoki, Kejachik, Sheoris, Kachik, Tusulayachik, Semano in Zinchini, and it Yaurmachik Sonja you di, one Togu and a Menasambi, Topa Savana, Yachatam Norvares. Yaurmachik Mankembaji, the Su Hakogres, Ra, and Yawarmuchi, one Matovaji, one Togres Lavchin, Zambling Nomangokotan Sigmaras. Kezi, Yawarmuchi, Dindi Chavan, and on the Sanji Temba singing, and Zavilama singing that, Zawin Zutusa Mejuji Chasons, but Dindi Tola, each Zawin Chego Maris, Yawarmuchi Kang, somebody Tolaya, Shaku, Rotuana, Manzu Lesajil Legri Modo, Telea Tovas and Devana, Nanzu Sajil Sado das, Ra.
Now, the reason that Geshe brings this point up is that now there's a situation that has occurred in Tibetan society. Now, Geshe didn't think that we would be hearing about different affairs that occur sometimes in Tibetan society, but sometimes we do. So just to make it clear, a few weeks ago, His Holiness gave an empowerment online. I believe there was a great compassionate one, Chinrezig empowerment. Following that, there was a lama, let's just say a lay lama with a family, with a wife and kids, Tulku Ugyen Togyal criticized dishonest and said that that would bring, giving empowerments online would destroy the Buddha Dharma. So, so then when we, think of such things that people say, and think of what is, the activities of His Holiness. Well, first of all, to obtain an empowerment, we have His Holiness the Dalai Lama that confers an empowerment, and at the end of conferring the empowerment, he gave certain indications, certain instructions, and at the end of the empowerment, one should think that the empowerment has been obtained. So, if someone says the empowerment has been obtained, another person would say the empowerment has not been obtained. Well, if His Holiness says that, if His Holiness gives the empowerment, confers an empowerment, and would just be then listening to someone else completely different who says that the empowerment has not been obtained, how can we know at the end that empowerments can be obtained? If we receive an empowerment from a certain teacher, we rely upon that person as a certain spiritual, as our own spiritual teacher, but then we still take on board something else, something that someone else has said, they're criticizing them. Also, how can we then properly rely upon a spiritual teacher? The whole topic of relying upon a spiritual teacher would then be completely invalidated. So Geshe feels that people could say different things, but in our mind, once we rely upon lamas such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, we need to follow such lamas properly in taking empowerments or teachings from them, in taking the mental attitude that we're following a certain teacher. The teachings are valid teachings, the speech is a valid speech, rather than starting to pay attention to many other people that could have, started paying attention to other people that might have something else to say. Otherwise, if we do pay attention to what other people say, sometimes we will completely lose the basis for deciding who is an authoritative teacher, a valid teacher, how can we receive an empowerment, when is an empowerment is received, and so forth.
Terda dinza dindilaya thugdo tsawnin nango maris chidani on thogda mathum sedi wangi pi khoda da yagbuji che tu da matulaya rali yur mado on tomato sedi lama da lama tuchi lame gi pemin kolaya phomba shaktu ba tsangi on thobati tsawnin drog mardas tsawnin drog maris ro da mishing ji baino da lama jing kolaya chi yupa solution show the one to something in the young child the tsawnin maris ti rodan din maris ro.
To receive an empowerment depends upon whether you have understood the indication, the instructions that the Lama led you through the course of an empowerment. It's not about whether a certain implement has touched your crown. Sometimes in the course of an empowerment, there is a vase that is being passed on and it is placed on your crown, or kind of whether a stick has been kind of placed on your head and so forth. The empowerment is not given through a stick or through a vase. The empowerment is received through understanding the instructions, the indications that are taught by the master during the course of an empowerment.
Terita Javad Nangolaya, the Sonsha, Jimmy part of the Chimbal Soba, Sherabgi part of Konle Kondu, Keshu, Pure Cheva Chow. Jimba the Sudam So, Govad and Geva Chung Cherry, Chetan, Che Medanshi, Chimbal and Beber Chow. Shugi, Nigachi Jerdu, Munition. Nan Domna, Chimbo Song, Chung Tendo. Chechong Kangi Georgiana. Sendi Randon and Sendon Tower, Chichi, Chishon Yamaguna, Dojin, Pensamos.
The commentary to verse 83 reads, engage in a skillful and progressive way into the six perfections, from generosity to wisdom, and increase them. Do not give up the practices of generosity, morality, and so forth that are smaller from the point of view of purpose and virtue to the generosity and so forth that are bigger. Striving the bigger. This shows implicitly that if we cannot practice both together and have to choose, then we should abandon the smaller for the bigger. So there's a query. How does one posit small and big? The answer is, for example, in this life, out of the purpose of self and the purpose of others, one decides by practicing the other. Then one should make the purpose of other the main practice.
Sumba sumjen tunji gi Tsultrim la labala sum jendun per lambatan ran nibe makoba jen du jabala du jabatan shen du jabatan simjin gi sem jis sonche nibe mugu jabala labawo dambo jendun per lambani tedar riji jendun la tawdu jomba neba chas.
We finished looking at the way to train in ethics of gathering virtuous dhammas. Let's look at the next type of ethics, which is the way to train in ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings. There are three main points in that section. Devoting oneself to the welfare of others in verse 84, then conduct that gathers others without sullying or polluting oneself with wrongdoings, and looking after the beings and training in the conduct that is unsullied by wrongdoings. Let's begin with the first two lines in verse 84 that comes at the heading of devoting oneself to the welfare of others. It says in the first part of the verse, having understood this, they abide always, striving for the welfare of others.
Majin Javadinda, Harshaba Tedars, Chanju Simbi Landurgini, Riba Cheti, Shendon, Tautu, Zomba Neva Chas, Chala, Shendon, Chavakazo Drugive, Rani Nibuko, and Euroshenas.
Then there's a query that Geshe posits in his commentary. Bodhisattvas strive to always abide in working for others on the basis of having understood what needs to be practiced and what needs to be abandoned. But since they need to engage into a variety of actions to achieve the welfare of others, do they not receive faults?
That the Chanju Sembi Landurgine, Riba Chesagi, Chanju Sembi Landurgine. Chanju Sembigi Landurg Nedi Karis Lam that so the Kabab Chanju Sembi Yamnendi and Chanju Sem Makiva Geva never con pay a chid the Betsupen Nangior in the Chanju Semgi Pigi Gasa so rodi and Ranchin Zindan, Shinchin Zing Samlodi, Kosa Jim Matubi and Wangi. And Chanju Semdi, Kietuyo Maros. Tinza Lanya di Kare, and Shendu Tuniki, Sambata, Jenchin Lodan, Toria di Ranchin Loti, Shen Yawatu Lodi, Yimba di, and Suzuki Nishi Tony, Rigba Chichini, and Shendun La Jungovris.
When it says here, Bodhisattvas strive to always abide in working for others on the basis of having understood what needs to be practiced and what needs to be abandoned. So the essential points in a Bodhisattva's practice of what needs to be taken up and what needs to be cast aside, those essential points are relevant to the practice of bodhicitta and the mind of enlightenment. One needs to generate bodhicitta if one hasn't done that so far. One needs to maintain that to prevent it from declining and to increase it more and more. Those are the essential points of what needs to be taken up and what needs to be cast aside with respect to bodhicitta. And then in order to be able to do that, one needs to exchange an attitude of cherishing oneself with an attitude of cherishing others. Because without exchanging self-cherishing for cherishing others, the mind of enlightenment will not arise. So what needs to be cast aside is an attitude of cherishing ourselves, of disregarding others. And we need to be able to approach that with a genuine and sincere mind that sees the points, the validity in discarding a self-cherishing attitude and an attitude that disregards other sentient beings. And if we do that, then an attitude of cherishing others will arise.
Any Kaukalaya, Suzu Pigi, any Neve Koyagi, any Nyangadoa, Karchigores, and Chivatamas, Tigoras.
So a doubt arises. If you need to act in a variety of ways, in so many different ways for the sake of others, isn't there a danger that you will incur faults along the way?
That D Lenlaya, Tuji our Rinzig, Kabanamia, Telanang said he, and that D Lenlaya and Roko Waters.
So the last two lines in this verse, the last two lines in this verse provide the answer. Thus, with compassion, have the long view and allow them the forbidden.
Retsing Tama Kabanamya, Telanang said he, and Tedadi, Tuji our Singitilia, Kogo Dastera, and Kodevodosena, Kabadi. Rang Chigbi Chedu, and Tarwan Devanam Laya, and Chawa P, that's Mugichibung Tsultrim Song Tony, and Kap Galaya, Kashaviki, and Chawadis, Chanju Sem Navigi, and Chanju Semba, and Shendu Dungin Solaya, Kaukalaya, Namayoris.
Those with compassion have the long view, or you can say the far-reaching view, and allow them the forbidden, which means that things that are prohibited are permitted in certain situations, certain situations to those that have compassion. So just to illustrate that, there are actions that are prohibited for those that want to attain the state of liberation. If you would like to attain the state of liberation for its own sake alone, you need to adopt the ethical discipline that abstains from the 10 non-virtues. So the 10 non-virtues are prohibited, yet in certain situations, they are permitted for those with compassion.
Tuji our Sanji Giring, Kogu Tenam Jans, Mosum to Sibi, Lunga Gimigi or Duna Soba, Nientu Randu So Cheva, La Kava Namjans, Kavsu Papi, say, Chanju Sambatella, Nama, Nawi, Niva Mungio, Mase, Tsultrim Gurdi, Sanchen Tavlaki Dole, Debin Hinji Chembi, Munava Sebi, Kawatumin, Koa Nimba, Somatan. The
commentary is quite clear with respect to that. So after the query that says, but since they need to engage into a variety of actions to achieve the welfare of others, do they not receive faults? Shantideva says those with compassion have the long view, they are far-sighted, and allow them the forbidden. The compassionate Buddhas also see directly the phenomena hidden very far in the future. Out of this knowledge, they permit the 7 non-virtuous actions of body and speech, which they prohibited for hearers and self-liberators who were primarily for their own purpose, for bodhisattvas when necessary. As a result, bodhisattvas do not incur fault, but for them it becomes a great accumulation when they engage in these actions. From the Sutra of being proficient in the great secret, it is taught that because the captain killed the evildoer, his time in cyclic existence was reduced by many eons. It is also like it was taught to the Brahmin's son, Karmajunga.
Yana tuji ngawi ring sikwa lunga gudun nami chanju sambanila shepherd chaos.
To complete the reading of this section, it says, or just refers to the bodhisattvas who were permitted the seven of body and speech by those with great compassion who see far ahead.
Re dachitangi nama topsi kansa di the ya tobi yondi khabar chenji mena ani nama di top mares ra nanji and di nama yor dondo ki tuschina chidan nyeba chir rogores pena tobi yondi kai mingi nanzu tabuchi ani chig sanji nama yor dondo shebaina di ani zabchin chagores chanchu sem gyulanga chin ninji chimbu gyulanga bi thoni ani shengi chedu ani rani lo tamdi ani hajangi ni sochimbu zoru gores ro.
So when here the text discusses actions that are permitted, though in general they're prohibited, we need to still approach that with a sense of trepidation. Without a high level of realizations, you do not obtain the permission to perform those actions. So it's particularly valid for us in that if we pretend as if we can behave in such ways because we've already got permission from the Buddha to behave in this way without having generated high level of realization, that would be a great danger for us, a dangerous behavior. Without developing a high level of realization, we're not permitted to act in this way. This way of acting is permitted for those that have developed great compassion, that have developed bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, in that they develop the willingness to sacrifice even themselves in order to protect others, for the sake of others.
And the chanju sambala lunga gile dun now yoris kapkalayata now yoris.
Like, for example, for bodhisattvas, sometimes there's the permission to perform the 7 actions of body and speech.
Niba ran nibe makoba shendu jobalanis. Sansing the doatan, chugi do, tambo sansing the doal sum, se segu jimbatan, mijimbi kabratan. Chavatensi ki chidu, lula mineva chavatan. Lu jimbaton tutan, gobasheva was.
So we've covered the first point in the way to train in the ethics of working for the benefit of sentient beings. Let's look at the second point, conduct that gathers others without sullying or polluting oneself with wrongdoings. There are 2 points in that section, gathering through material generosity and gathering through Dharma. Beginning with gathering through material generosity, there are 3 points. The difference between giving and not giving food and clothing, not causing harm to the body for the sake of minor actions, and explaining the time and need for practicing giving of body. Let's begin with the difference between giving and not giving food and clothing.
Tambonis, Segu Jimbatan, Mijimbi Cabernet Laundi, and Chetan Nanzu Jimbat Tango Yori, and Jimbatango Yodenia, Unse Tamalo, Trevaina, Yang Kapkalaya, Mindiwachik, and Tuda Nekap Mambujelaya, and Tony, and Majimbaina, and Jimba Digi, Pembi Savaya, never用的tinji ra leg bitsa the never用的tinji yungu yonza and di khabar di shingu gres ra khabar di shingu gres.
So the first section distinguishes between giving and not giving food and clothing. So although we need to give, we need to be generous. Still, and you can say that at some point that we need to give away everything. Still, if we give not in the right time, not in the right situation or occurrence or event, not only that giving will not be considered to be a good thing, it could be a fault. So we do need to know the difference between when to give and when not to give.
Re tsaveno lokbar tondam gemeta tushu nanga kochashi remba tsamdo sajati chugusumato pajinsa topajin.
So verse 85 says, share with those fallen into the wrong direction, with the protectorless and those abiding within austerities. Eat only in a measured fashion and offer everything apart from the three robes.
Sela lonchibi tse lobar tonga tundrotan yedatan gwemebi neba sotan tujula neba sambar sombar choba yona tela ya chari kor chashi rani ya tamjela sörik chas shesombatars.
It says, while using food, share with those falling into the wrong directions, meaning animals and hungry ghosts, and with the protectorless, sick, and with those that practice pure action and abide in austerities, if they are there as well. As it is said, it is appropriate for oneself to measure everything.
Pe yabu da dang di cheni pe na ngaro cheni thogum mudo ata pe na sel chebitses pe na susu khala savi kavya ani chigleya pe na ani ta thundro tawo ani chachiwu tawo ani ghem maybe ki nebala soba ani bi chambo chombo chobole nedingi o dimji gi tutoleya ani chig se marange tinji yobana ani susu sedi ani pi goisha gyami ani chegoya di pekechimbu redos ra district songodos.
This section gives us good instructions. It says, for example, whilst using food, share with those falling into the wrong directions, meaning animals and hungry ghosts, with their protectorless, with the sick, and with those that practice pure action and abide in austerities, if they are there as well. So Geshe said that, for example, for him, it is a good reminder of what he needs to do. When having food, if there are animals around you, birds and so forth, if there are people that are impoverished, sick, if there are those that practice austerities and so forth, then you should share your food with them. You should divide your food amongst others.
Rekala kaddu senya pechi trogoja chejoroji kaddu na trogoja chejoroji charudos ngaro dil charudos ta di chedi sozu kala puba kanni goshejan pachi tetuwaina kala di trogonono ya di omadi rani jan tamjel cheriba chase di yongya ya pendo yosara sra rani jan tamjel ya cheri chase da cheriba mo sele geoji sena kiu mudas trogoja chejan kiu zoin mudas ra.
So it's good to think of sharing a food with others. Often when we have a food, we have too much food. Geshe said that at least on a personal level, his plates are normally big. So it's too much. So it's good to think about having to actually, when you get a plate of food, then to share your food with others, to give to birds, animals, or what have you. So you get a bowl with food, right? So the food should be in the right amount, the amount that you can take. And you should also think that you're going to give some of it to others. As it says here in the commentary, it is appropriate for oneself to measure everything, in a sense that be measured with the way that you eat. Don't eat too much. Give also to others.
아니 세츠리버세티 아니 쇼주송여라스 전주세미냥네는 세츠리버디여바이나 아 루콤 데리아 아 펭귀여서리스 다디 페네트리바이나 디 페시 라위게스 루콤 데리 난지 세망자바이나 아니 수분여도 차야 니 몽데야 소바디 아니 야샤야다마 당한지 뇽이 쪼고도스 인자 아니 츠리버지 텐투바이나 간지통 아니 상부 중부용야 아니 상부용야 아니 수부대부용야 아니 신리야 펜도즈 주고 중이야 이 남조대 데미톤 주투야 자기는 로투사라스로 세송바들 셀레템비 카나만도 메바 렘바점도 사버 자디 콜론소 시진 송바들 차워스 제 시진 송바들 차워스
It is appropriate for oneself to measure everything. In the Vinaya tradition, there's a statement, for example, that monastics should have appropriate serving, so the right measure of food. So when we think of how food affects our physical well-being, if you have too much food, medical science says that it is not good for you, it's not good for your physical well-being. But we also know, based upon a personal experience, that when we overeat, we become quite lethargic, we become sleepy, our mind becomes a bit dull, a bit dim. Whereas when we eat right in the right proportion, right measure, and food does contribute to a physical well-being, then it supports a mind that is more sharp, that is alert, that is smart, that can think of certain situation. It contributes, or it acts as a positive condition to situations that we encounter. So this is why Geshe Rinpoche said here, in quoting the section, it is appropriate for oneself to measure everything, have a measured approach to your practice.
long down the inji to down you know sitting no ya tanang ju kanji changjer mala lunen ba shi che seji suya and lu gyab che de mai ba pile ya chi nga ye ki bi che de mai ba cha bo mai ba and dimji gi and kolon di lu ne ba shi che de and set am chi lu ne wi toni and shendön jugo za 륜네번 바시 이체도 마도 아니 지 아니 야바다 제발로 소바다 아니 차발로 소비 체도 아니 세템바치 마이바치 콜노 딘디 마이바치 고그리 소마난 신치.
Nagarjuna, in his letter to a friend, also gave an advice with respect to the motivation, the attitude that you should have when you eat your food. He said, do not eat your food with being arrogant, with pride, with attachment, and so forth. Eat your food only in thinking that it's contributing to your physical well-being, so that you'll have enough to live, to get by. Do not have other motivations, such as arrogance, pride, attachment, and so forth.
Tangutis, Chugusum Matoba, Yoshi Shayona, jimbar chawos.
So it says, oneself should eat just enough according to the value paid, without incurring faults in relation to food, and with the motivation of eating that is explained in the letter to a friend by Nagarjuna. An ordained bodhisattva should offer everything apart from the 3 robes, which are namjar, tagu, and tangu.
Lagu.
Lagu. Oh, sorry, should be lagu. Lagu is the, sorry. So you have the namjar, lagu is the upper robe, and tangul, the shanta.
That this jina jingmarada ro maramandona jingmara sinza this mahidibi and kokarina and pena lagu tangu tawuyana and shanay jingoris.
It wouldn't be okay to give away your robes to somebody else. It wouldn't be right for you to go around naked, right? So don't give your robes away and walk around naked. But if you have extra robes, then it is permitted to give your extra set to someone else.
Reta the be junju ne somba na chebaina and chanju samba and have a sumding chanju samba. The number yongsarasra and be and tab debu yakushuchik yongsarasra kazingi parch tanda talentina dirichiki lombachi gelonchi gelon di lodja de chipshi Tele came to all male soldiers and dance was going shooting. Come, and never jumped in the what did it? Yahu does a and children are just doing things when they can't make it. The G does it, and a child of the mother came there and met the top they wish and near answer the gentleman does.
So Geshe said that he came across this photo of this fully ordained, it looks like a Theravada monk. It said that he's like 114 years old. And Geshe said that looking at his photo, it seems like this is like a really good gelong, really good monk. So if you're a bodhisattva that properly trains in the 3 trainings, then it's good to live simply, to have a comfortable and simple way of living. Have just enough food, enough clothing, but not to have an access of all of them. To live simply, that would be the best way to live. It's only kind of, it seems that it's quite similar to your body. You like his bed too, all right.
Not going to get the general, Kazaki Tonra, Shoji, Shoji, you want to toss. Send a Malam Tandra, Gish Dojin was not the rich. Many young desert soda, could not soda, and could then chingu show the Dima go on my time testing my ordinary Malam Tansha.
Yeah, I guess I saw that photo a few days ago and kind of he found this photo to be really nice. And he had a dream the other night. He was hanging up with his friend, Geshe Dojinima. And they saw this photo and they were trying to make the room, the beddings and so forth, similar to this monk. So, they kind of tried to fit the mattress on the floor and to make sure that there's enough room for the head and the feet and so forth. They were working hard in order to make sure that they can fit the mattress into the room.
Geshe Yaku Yoris, Geshe Yaku, Dinan, Na Yaku Shuch, Nanzuniam de Ringasadu, Chanzan Jigitsani, Lolo Cinnamon, Kanji, and Genkorang Lodge in Najuta, and to Sni, and Zindichi were the Lamatauch Sigis. So
this Geshe that Geshe mentioned, Dojinima, is a really good Geshe. Not only is learned in the sutra system, but also in mantra. They spent some time reading twice through Lamtsum Kapa's lamp illuminating the 5 paths. So rather than reading it together, Geshe said that since Geshe Dojinima is so learned, it's like he was actually like their teacher. So Geshe thought that it's not just reading with his classmate, it's just like receiving teachings from a teacher.
어디 셈바찌리 메나스 셈바찌리 메나 짐바 메자디 셈바찌 베나다 죽은 좀 아니 찍고지 모두 메나 짐바 메자디 셈바찌비 발치리 기비치스 산주기 아니 발치리 기브리스 로
If one has if one has more of the three robes, then one should also offer these. But if one has only one set, then one should not offer one's robes. It becomes an obstacle to the practice of pure action.
자와텐스기 추도 이바 자와텐스기 추도 르르네바 무자와니 담비 추니 쮸비 르 텐스기 추도 네무자 대들체는 심진기 삼번유도 조번 교스
Let's look at, sorry, it's not this one. Let's look at the next verse that is coming under the section of do not harm the body or for small actions. Do not harm for insignificant action this body that practices the supreme Dharma. If one acts in this way, the wishes of sentient beings will be accomplished swiftly.
강시 손나 랑신기 된자쯤부터 담비치는 쮸비 땐도 기회 랑기 류 현라 펜바 텐스기 쳐도 내가 메자디 마션도 손을 차오 대달체나 단절 때는 하버스 좁은 거를 심진기 삼바 유 좁은 기회 채로스
The commentary says one's body, which is the basis for practice of the holy Dharma, that accomplishes extensive benefit for self and others, if it is guarded well, should not be harmed for a small benefit of others. Rather, it should be guarded like a wound. If one does this, then by way of completing the three higher trainings on the basis of the precious human rebirth, the wish to accomplish the welfare of sentient beings will be quickly completed.
Thank you.
Thank you. No de nyu do da lama sangi lo yune ro achi
Tigamanu pate salago pasho
rinpoche ma ke pa na ke gyuchi ke pa nyam pa me pa yang ko le kundo ke wa sho ko we shin gon ji pen dan de wa ma lu chu we ne chen re si wan te si yan so sha pe si de pa du ten gyuchi
Sondur juberan seje sanse kanjin tenju
Chana pemo tensi yasola soa der so shendu lo sho Changchung gawe ten zengyong pewe kunzo do kozi Chosung kowe le mun tuju pa daso duje kondu shaten sho.
Thank you.
Maybe next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Geshe-la. Thank you, Katzen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Geshe-la. Thank you, Karsten.
Dila. Sola. So someone said that there is a snake here with like a big animal in its belly. Where? Can you see it from the way?
That's what the roads He doesn't need to eat for a while. Probably.
Yeah, too much eating.
But it seems that this python cannot be again. Maybe I should take the camera out to show everyone the snake. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, that would be a good idea, Carson, please.
Going on here.
Oh, really?
You watch their faces.
Yeah.
So, what was coming and being her birthday?
Yeah, it went through the senior nuns. Yeah, but she's got these strict conditions that she's going to abide by, but it is knowing, but not until Easter. Yeah, I know, this is a bit, yeah, it is a dog, yeah, I know, but I just.
No, I talked to the dog, you know, but it's just like.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
It's not like.
No, I get it. I get it. I know, I get it.
It may have eaten a possum or something. It's eaten something. It's got to digest it.
I did think to him, oh, it's just not worth it.
Oh,
But anyway.
yeah, it's just eaten something. I'd say it must be something of reasonable size. Probably a possum or bush turkey. It wouldn't be a bush turkey, I don't think.
I could be a baby bush turkey, you never know.
Yeah, more. Oh, it could be, yeah. But it looks a bit big for a baby bush turkey. I'd say more like a baby wallaby or possum, something like that. Yeah. Wow. What a beautiful snake. Wow.
Think about the amount of time it's gone by or something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I'm just like kind of really annoyed with FPP about it. I know, that's what I mean. Pursued it.
Oh, you see that? I mean, I think we just turned them off now, right?
I mean, I do, but I don't, you know? And if you really, really wanted to do it.
Okay, everybody, that's enough snake business.
Like to complete it, just to be a completion. Well, that's what I was saying, that's what